What's up, everybody? It's Sam Dunn here on Banger TV. A little bit of a different setting. What I'm doing today is for the first time in a really long time, I'm going to be watching our first film, Metal Headbanger's Journey, which premiered at the Toronto Film Festival in 2005 and went out to the world in 2006. And, really, this is the film that is the reason why we are still here at Banger making films and series about metal artists and metal culture. So, yeah, it's going to be a bit of a weird ride. Going to have to trigger the memory a little bit, brush away the cobwebs, so to speak. But yeah, looking forward to it. Looking forward to going back in time and reliving some memories of making our first film, Metal Headbanger's Journey. Yes, that was Scotty's idea. Love it. The play on the countdown with 666 sets the tone. Sets the tone early. So, I think most of you know what this is. This is footage from the legendary short documentary called Heavy Metal Parking Lot. It was filmed in a parking lot at a Judas Priest concert in Maryland in 1986. Zebra Boy. Zebra Boy. Amazing. There's so much funny stuff in this thing. I don't know if the filmmakers ever intended for this to be as funny or as legendary as it became, but there you go. So yeah, I mean, when I look at this, it's like I am 12 in 1986. I didn't see Heavy Metal Parking Lot when it came out. I think it was a while later. I can't remember when exactly. But yeah, 86 was a huge year for me and for metal. Master of Puppets, Rain and Blood, Maiden's Live After Death had just come out, I think, the year before. Those were the huge records for me, and so kind of set me on this path. But yeah, we put this intro together, basically to kind of paint the picture of how metal has been vilified for a long time. And, we made this film because we didn't really think that there'd ever been a great documentary made about the music of metal, the culture of metal, the community around it, but also the controversy, which we've been showing here, and how really it seemed to be a music that deeply polarized people. You loved it or hated it. There's no middle ground. So why is that? What is this about metal? What is it about metal that does that? All right. Yeah, Victoria, I think that's my grade 12 school photo. Speaking Park, Victoria, me playing the bass. We include little designs of the metal logos I used to draw on my school booklets, like I'm sure many of you did at one day. Yeah, and this is really just kind of like setting up my own evolution in metal, which kind of started with the pop metal, the popular metal of the 80s. But yeah, here we go. This is when it got good. I mean, as the 80s wore on, extreme metal became a thing. Bands like Sepultura were hugely important to me. So these are all shots of, all the albums that I had and still have, and really got me into the more underground world of metal. I did a radio show, played in a few bands back home. So I was hooked.
At 19, I went to university. And since metal studies wasn't on the curriculum,
sorry about the grad photo there. Oh man. And I went traveling to Guatemala in my early 20s when I moved to Toronto to do my master's degree in anthropology. That was an amazing experience. kind of a full immersion experience, living with a family who only spoke Spanish, so it's a good reason to catch up and brush up on my Spanish for my degree. This was shot in Robarts Library at University of Toronto, where I spent a lot of time during my master's degree researching and writing my thesis.
So this is my journey. I'm gonna take you into the world of heavy metal.
So, I don't know if that's the guy, but I was at a show, and a guy came up to me and said, I've never met you, but I remember when the film came out, I had all these people coming up to me saying that you're in this new metal movie. And he was like, he had no idea, blah, blah, blah. And I literally met, I think it's the guy with the long hair beside me on the barrier there. I just met him like a few weeks ago. So isn't that something? 20 years later. So, story I've told before, I'll tell it again. It was important to us that we used a song in the title sequence for this film, which felt contemporary, not just nostalgic. And, in 2004, when we were editing this film, Lamb of God was a band that was on a pretty sharp ascent. And, Laid to Rest was the kind of the new big track by them, and we just really wanted to include it in this film because it felt it had the right energy and was sort of the current sound of metal, which was important to us. No one misses the Chia Pet. Certainly not me. Called it the Chad Kroger at one point. No one misses the ginger patch there on the chin. So, when we were making this film, originally we had a much more kind of conventional idea of telling more straightforward history of metal. But Scott suggested, well, why don't we make this more of a personal journey, kind of bring in the anthropology angle. And so when we did that, it meant that we didn't really know how to handle telling the history of metal. And so the heavy metal family tree, which we used at the top of this sequence here, was shout out to Martin Popoff, who was a huge part of piecing that together. We realized that we needed something like a heavy metal family tree to help check in on the history of metal, because it's so vast and it's not really connected to my personal journey per se. So that was the reason why we developed that family tree. And you can buy one on BangerTV. We still got some kicking around, although it's 20 years old, so a little bit dated.
In Rolling Stone magazine. Rolling Stone magazine was doing an interview with us, I think in 71, 72.
Yeah, and I mean,
there was this picture of this
it's kind of bizarre watching this film now because, back then, this was the first time I had met any of these artists. There's the Lamb of God guys, Alice, Rob Zombie, Getty, the Cannibal Corpse guys. All of these artists I had never met before. But it's funny watching it now, like we've gone on to make films with several of these artists, obviously Rush and Alice being two of the bigger ones.
Most people associate Black Sabbath with Ozzy Osbourne, now known as a
So,
reality TV dad,
yeah.
but it was Tony Iommi, Sabbath's guitarist, who was
I mean,
responsible for creating the band's sound.
Meeting Tony Iommi, where do you start with that? we were just super excited and grateful that he wanted to be part of this film, because we felt obviously we couldn't make a film about metal without Sabbath in it, because most people would agree they were the ones that created the sound and the aesthetic of heavy metal back in the early 70s. So this is there's a bunch of them in this film, but certainly for me as a fan, this is a pinch me moment for sure, to be hanging with Tony, making our first film, and frankly not really knowing what we're doing, but just doing it because we knew the story needed to be told. So that was a nerve-wracking but exciting moment for me.
Since Black Sabbath, the sound of evil has become a defining element of heavy metal. But what makes metal sound evil?
The blues scale has the flat fifth, the tritone. That's the devil's note. Like in the old days, you weren't allowed to use that note.